220 BC. A new beast is rising from the great sea. Rome is her name, Africa her desire, for she has her eyes set on an older, more powerful empire. Carthage, one man stands in her way, Hannibal Barca. The ancient records speak at length of the terror of the one-eyed general, his confederate army of Iberians and Celts, spearheaded by his fellow native North Africans, stampeding their monstrous cavalcade of elephants across the Alps to the very gates of Rome. But what exactly did these North Africans look like? Ancient manuscripts, artifacts, science, each gives us an answer. Except you won't hear these answers anywhere else. Look carefully, listen closely, and ask yourself, why? First, the manuscripts. Silius Italicus, 28 to 103 AD, Punica. Tunga the Moor, a terrible giant, rushed forward to battle. His body was black, and his lofty chariot was drawn by black horses. Anonymous Roman author, 100 AD. Now the dregs of the Gadamantes parade in our Roman district, and this native rejoices in his pitch-black body. If not for the human voice issuing from his lips, this demon with awful face would horrify men. Sextus Julius Frontinus, 40 to 100 AD, Stratagems. Gello, tyrant of Syracuse, in the war against the Carthaginians, having taken many prisoners, selected the weakest among the auxiliaries, who were all very black, and made them appear naked in the presence of his soldiers to excite their contempt. Martial, 38 to 100 AD, Epigrams. When you are poorer than even the wretched Irus, more vigorous than even Parthenopaeus, stronger than even Artemidorus in his prime, why do you delight to be carried by 6 Cappadocian slaves? You are laughed at, African, afar, and derided much more than you would be were you to walk naked in the middle of the forum. In like manner do people point at the black elephant carrying its Libyan driver of the same hue. Juvenal, 100 AD, the Satires. Your cups will be handed you by a running footman from Getulia, Tunisia, or the bony hand of some Moor, so black that you would rather not meet him at midnight. Claudian, 400 AD. When tired of each noblest matron, Gildo hands her over to the Moors. Married in Carthage city, these Sidonian mothers must needs mate with barbarians. And so he thrusts upon me an Ethiopian for a son-in-law, a Berber for a husband. The hideous half-breed child affrights its cradle. Procopius, A History of the Wars, Book 4. And the Moors also held land to the west of Aurasium, Algeria, a tract both extensive and fertile, and beyond these dwelt other nations of Moors. Beyond that, there are men not black-skinned like the Moors, but very white in body and fair-haired. How many ways can you say black? If you're a Roman in North Africa 2,000 years ago, plenty. Garamantian, Moor, Libyan, Afar, Getulian, Berber, and of course the favorite, Ethiopian. But 2,200 years is a long time. The world and Africa has changed a little since then. In far less time, the peoples of North America were brought to near extinction through genocide, displacement, and forced assimilation. North Africa? Rinse and repeat, 2,000 times 365. When the Romans finally defeated Carthage, they would burn the city and her people to the ground. Many of the artifacts presented today as hailing from Carthage are not from Carthage. After Rome, there was no Carthage. Quote, "The destruction was so complete that when Julius Caesar decided to reinstate Carthage as a Roman colony 98 years later, the city had to be rebuilt entirely." Natasha Sheldon, historyandarchaeologyonline.com. Only more devastation lay in store for Africa, north of the Sahara. Ottoman Turks, Arabized Near Easterners, the French, the Spanish, even the English have laid waste to the Maghreb and its ancient peoples in 2,000 years. These horrors, like those being suffered by Africans today, were almost never documented by those who perpetrated them. Naturally. But the ghosts of those who once peopled Hannibal's land speak out, not only from Roman manuscripts, they scream from the artifacts. You might have seen some. You will not have seen all. Nowhere near. Again, why? Take this, a panel depicting a Moorish cavalry under the command of the Roman general Lucius Quietus, fighting against the Dacian Empire. Note not just their facial features, but their distinctly African hair, prepared in the same way Africans in the northeast of Africa still prepare their hair today. Are the experts truly oblivious to the anthropological connection between these people and their more widely diffused ancestors, from Egypt to Morocco? Have anthropologists completely failed to notice that the only people in Africa who stubbornly maintain the appellation Afar, used by the Romans to refer to North Africans, are these people, literally the Afar of Sudan, Eritrea, and modern Ethiopia? Witness their features and their hair preparation practices found on the walls of Egypt and enduring till much later, even on the friezes of Rome and the busts of Hellenistic Alexandria. But why were Romans depicting North Africans fighting in Dacia, labeled on today's maps as Romania, Ukraine, and surrounding areas? What were Africans doing fighting alongside Romans as far as Eastern Europe? Ecclesiastes 1:9. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Like the British would realize millennia later across Africa and Asia, to conquer your enemy, fight him with your enemy. Romans regularly incorporated conquered peoples into their armies, transporting them to regions thousands of miles away from home to fight men and women they could not possibly feel any loyalty or allegiance towards. And that is exactly why archaeologists would discover this in modern-day Romania. This, then, is a witness to what has been buried for centuries in favor of anachronistic busts, malappropriated coins, and incongruous Roman statues in Africa. Behold this anonymous warrior, undeniably African, and he was found in Romania, dated to be roughly from the 2nd century, when Rome's North African legion would have been in Dacia. But he's not alone. Similar busts, carved or beaten with similar features, have been found all over, you guessed it, North Africa. These are Hannibal's descendants, his fellow Africans cast in bronze and stone, repurposed by Lucius Quietus barely centuries later, no longer to terrify Romans, but Dacians. Note the very same trichological practices can be seen on these bronze statues, this one with the same calamistrated hairstyle unique to black and African peoples. From whence? The ancient city of Volubilis, modern-day Morocco. Don't be fooled by these ruins with their strewn Roman-styled columns. In antiquity, Volubilis saw destruction and renewal many times over, and these ruins, Volubilis' most recent reincarnation, testimony to her checkered past, remained a mystery for centuries, until the coming of French archaeologist Charles-Joseph Tissot. Tissot discovered ancient Arabic sources referring to the city as Qasr Pharaoun, in English, Pharaoh's Palace. Yet he remained puzzled. Then came this woman. A contemporary of Tissot, the traveller and historian Elizabeth Caroline Gray would do the unthinkable and ask the locals. Their answer? Elizabeth Gray, History of Etruria, 1843. In Morocco are the noble ruins of a town called Qasr Pharaoun, or the city of Pharaoh. They say that it was destroyed by the Ethiopian pharaoh Teraka, thus evidencing that they warred with the pharaohs. Unlabeled and unexplained, many authorities want you to believe these busts are unremarkable representations of exotic servants or the ubiquitous Ethiopian slave. No such inscriptions exist on these hundreds and hundreds of artifacts found across North Africa. But take off the Eurocentric glasses, framed by the centuries-long self-serving narratives of some, and you realize these are not slaves, they are natives. How else could Romans depict the people around them on African soil again and again and again? Rome might have destroyed Carthage and the evidence of who the Carthaginians were, but it couldn't get at these. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of murals on walls of Saharan caves, from a time the desert was filled with African vegetation, African beasts, and African people. Millennia later, where the testimony of Roman art is not found in Africa, it is to be found in Britannia. Like this balsamarium labelled in the British Museum as Moorish horse rider, another member of Rome's cosmopolitan forces fighting in Londinium. Then there are the gods of Carthage, like this North African depiction of Apollo, found off the coast of Egypt, full-lipped, tight curling crinkled hair, and a flawlessly straight nose ridge. The figure is a spitting image of an Nilotic man, perhaps a Beja man, perhaps Oromo, or maybe a man from Aswan, today part of the Arab Republic of Egypt, but not too long ago, well within the borders of Nubia and the Sudan. What of this bust, dated to 100 AD, barely 2 centuries on from Carthage's fall? The marble bust presents the Greek idol Hermes as the Carthaginians envisaged him, like themselves, distinctly African. Why would slaves and mere exotic sideshows be cast as gods? They wouldn't. Yes, Carthage began life as a port city of the Phoenicians, but while the ignorant believe this to be evidence of Carthage's isolation from Africans, those who know their history cry, Eureka! This is Africa BC, not the Jim Crow South AD or Cape Town AD. Abandon your white men's crutches or you enter here. For here, there are neither coloured water fountains nor whites-only motels. Not for the Africans who allowed trading Phoenicians to settle their land. No, indigenous Africans remained the majority in North Africa, while the mercantile Phoenician did business, assimilated, intermarried, interbred. But what of the Phoenicians? They are shrouded in mystery, mystery only surpassed by their dark origins. So dark you might say, black. Perhaps it's time for a look at who the Phoenicians truly were, and perhaps that can only be decided by an even more mysterious group of people. First, the anonymous subscribers and would-be subscribers, people like you right now watching eagerly, waiting for the next exciting bit of evidence as to who the Carthaginians were. Then there are our members, the scrupulous scholars, the stalwart soldiers, and sable sages of the Trill Nation. We welcome the newest scholars of the Trill Nation, you, Zamatra Jamal, you, Brett Macklin, you too, Vincent Stone, you, Marcus Smith, and you, the blessed trifecta, Life 1042, Demetrius McLean, and Tut Ankh Ra. Welcome all. We see you. Meanwhile, our generals stand in the wings, the mighty man of war, K. Wright Carr, and the great Sufi coming to Africa. Finally, generals, please order your men. Javelins to attention. 21 Medjay bows drawn to salute the great council of sages. Dante Crane, Andujar Payne, Kepa Ka-Ra Senostrit III, and perhaps the ghost of Hannibal himself, Black Rampage 2. Thank you, members, for helping to teach future onyx-hued generations about their great and global heritage, from Kush to Compton. To the rest of our friends watching, why not cast in your lot with these noble souls and click the join button below now. Whatever you do, be sure to tap that like button and the truth about the Phoenicians will be revealed on the Trill Black channel before you can say Anubali. You have been listening to the evidence from the archaeological record, and before that, the historical record. Now, for the witness of hard science. This is Eugene Pittard. Pittard was an internationally renowned anthropologist who applied craniometric ratios to the remains of ancient Carthaginians. Eugene Pittard was shocked at his results, but it didn't keep him from being honest. Quote, "Those who have visited the Lavigerie Museum at Carthage during recent years will remember the magnificent sarcophagus of the priestess of Tanit, discovered by Pierre Delattre. This sarcophagus, the most highly decorated and artistic of those found, and whose outer image probably represents the goddess herself, must have been the coffin of a very great ecclesiastical personage, and the woman it contained exhibited Negroid characters. She was an African by race. It is certain that a great portion of the Carthaginian population was not Phoenician. It merely bore the Phoenician label. Other skeletal remains found in Punic Carthage and deposited in the Lavigerie Museum are of specimens discovered in private tombs that very likely belonged to the Carthaginian elite. The skulls are nearly all dolichocephalic. Dolichocephalic? That's a skull shape and size typical among black populations across Africa, African Americans, and Aboriginal Australians. Where pronounced dolichocephaly occurs in Europeans or Eurasians, it is usually classed as a physical anomaly, even deformity. Eugene Pittard once more on the skulls found in Punic Carthage. The skulls are nearly all dolichocephalic. This is not phrenology, the pseudoscience used by Pittard's contemporaries to predict intelligence by race and denigrate blacks. This is anthropometry, histology, craniometry, morphology, and every time these substrata of anthropology have been applied to the remains of ancient North Africans, they have yielded the same answers. Oxford professor Gay Robbins used these methods to study the bones of the pharaohs. Her conclusion? Quote, Super Negroid. The oldest mummy ever found on the African continent, that of a Libyan boy from the Neolithic era. The scientific verdict? Quote, Negroid features. Ivory bangle lady, the remains of an aristocratic North African noblewoman, among the first to settle in Roman England. Quote, multivariate analyses, including measuring Mahalanobis distance, suggested a strong affinity with two reference populations of African American females from the 19th and 20th centuries. But what of this word, Gadamantes? Earlier we showed Roman sources exhibiting a visceral fear of this contingent of Hannibal's army, calling them burnt skin and pitch black. Vague descriptions, surely. What does the science say? Professor of Bioarchaeology Euphemia Nikita, Human Skeletal Remains, 2007. The Gadamantes cluster most closely to sub-Saharan Africans, and secondarily to the Roman Egyptians from Alexandria and the Nubians from Soleb. Overall, these results are reasonable, given that from the archaeological evidence it is known that the Gadamantes were in close connection with sub-Saharan Africa, and at different times with people from Egypt and the Mediterranean coast of Africa. The evidence is in. Those who fought Hannibal and his obsidian warriors have testified. The archaeological record buttresses their testimony, and the science echoes their witness. But some are still not content. Today, many have run to the genetic scientists for cover while clutching their Bibles of pseudo-history and science. These empty oracles whisper back the denier's deepest longings. Blacks never made it past the Sahara. To keep their fantasy alive, they ignore legions of Tuaregs and Berbers from the Zaghawa to the Fulani, who have not only crossed the Sahara since time immemorial, but today live in the Sahara, gleaming in the sun that only their God-given skin can weather. The deniers used trumped-up and manipulated studies on dubious Egyptian samples to deny indigenous Africans their history and heritage. Alas, an even higher verdict is against them. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help. Can we prove their folly? That even genetics, properly analyzed and contextualized, prove the ancient people of North Africa were Africans? We can, and we will, but not today. Today, it is enough to wonder why so many experts and dilettantes, YouTube historians and their followers alike, are so desperate to divorce black people from the history of their own continent, from the story of human progress and advancement. Could it have anything to do with the desire, conscious or not, to carry on the pillaging of black people, their lands and resources, to continue the building up of white nations on the backs of mute blacks, while the refrain goes out, thus has it ever been, and thus must it ever be. Indeed, Hannibal's Carthage has not been burned, it is still being burned. But it will rise once more, along with the sons and daughters of Ham, from Cush to Compton. Want to know what the great General Hannibal actually looked like? Then click the video on your screen right now. From Cush to Compton, this has been Trill Black, no doubt.